Max Holloway is taking on Charles Oliveira this Saturday, and he is the favorite. He's been looking phenomenal in the lightweight division. He's still got his speed and accuracy from featherweight, but now he's actually starting to hurt people. He's knocking Justin Gaethje out. He's dropping Dustin Poirier, and a lot of people think that he's going to do the exact same thing to Charles Oliveira. But I have built a game plan for Charles Oliveira to actually beat Max Holloway this Saturday. Despite being the underdog, we're going to talk about how the underdog can pull off the upset this Saturday. This is not an official prediction. It's merely me building a game plan for Charles Oliveira to get the win. But with all that being said, let's get right into the first key to reach I have for Charles Oliveira, and that's going to be Max Holloway has often been described as a momentum fighter, a guy who, when he finds his flow, is very hard to stop. Because he's just going to keep on teeing off on you, and he's going to land like a record amount of strikes like he did against Brian Ortega and Calvin Kattar. So you got to stop it early and make sure he doesn't get into his flow. And one of the main ways Charles Oliveira can do this is by shooting takedowns on Max Holloway, make him think that you're going to strike with him, strike a little bit, but then as soon as he gets really comfortable striking, that's when you shoot for the legs. And if you get him down to the ground, you're Charles Oliveira. You have a massive advantage over him on the ground. Oliveira could even finish the fight from getting the fight down to the ground. But I do think that he is going to need to mix in the wrestling to really disrupt that rhythm of Max Holloway and really get Max to think about the grappling and defending that and making sure he doesn't get down to the ground with you. And also another way you could do this is as soon as you feel Max Holloway start to cross that distance to get in range to hit you, kick him in the knee. Look to strike as soon as he gets into range, or you could be looking to get a hold of him with a clinch. You don't have to necessarily go for a takedown, but you can look to get into some form of clinch. And I do believe Oliveira has a strong tight clinch, and he can start to look for his knees and elbows from there. Ultimately, I think breaking the rhythm with the grappling and shooting takedowns is going to benefit Charles Oliveira a lot. Leg kicks have been a bit of a weakness for Max Holloway with the way he stands and the incredible movement he's got. It only makes sense to target the legs of Max Holloway, and Charles Oliveira just so happens to have some beautiful leg kicks of his own. So I believe it's going to be a very effective weapon for him in this matchup, and I think he's definitely going to have to implement this, but Charles has to set his leg kicks up properly. But I'm going to be elaborating on this in an upcoming key to victory. Just stay tuned. But moving on to another key to victory I have for Oliveira, and that is now what I mean by stay in position is essentially maintain your stance. And there's a lot of ways in MMA that you can break your stance. Maybe you can throw a big punch and you can break your stance by bringing your back foot to your front foot, and maybe you're kind of reaching on some of your shots. Maybe you can be evading a shot and you end up in a position where your lead foot is behind your rear foot and you're kind of out of balance. And this is a problem against Max Holloway because he does a great job of punishing his opponents if they do get out of balance, if they're kind of reaching for some shots or they're bringing their lead foot behind their rear foot, or they're crossing their feet, or they're doing something to get out of position. And Oliveira doesn't typically do this, but he's got to make sure he doesn't do this against Max Holloway, because this is a great way for Max to hurt him. This is how Max was able to hurt Dustin Poirier so many times. Max Holloway is very sharp, and that is a very easy opening for a striker of Max Holloway's level to take advantage of. So make sure you're not overswinging, not overthrowing, and always staying in a strong stance. But moving on to another key trick I have for Charles Oliveira, and that is I believe that the jab is the best weapon in all of mixed martial arts, to be honest. I feel like you can really control a fight. We've seen fighters like Kamaru Usman dominate and get KOs with jabs. We've seen George St. Pierre dominate fighters with jabs instead of takedowns. And also against Max Holloway, we've seen Justin Gaethje land a lot of jabs despite not really throwing a lot of them. Like here, look at his starting position where his arm is, and then boom, he just extends his jab and it catches Max Holloway clean. It doesn't really take too much effort to throw the jab, and it's a beautiful way to set up more of your combinations. Volkanovski was having success with the jabs against Max Holloway. Ilia Topuria was having success with the jabs. And I think for Charles Oliveira, a guy with a high guard, a guy with a longer reach than Max Holloway, I think that is going to be one of his best weapons in this fight. I think he's going to need to use and find that jab early if he really wants to have success and get his hands on Max Holloway. But moving on to another key trait I have for Charles Oliveira, and that is now that we've established the jab for Charles Oliveira, he'll have a lot more success landing his right hand on Max Holloway. A good jab will tell you where your target's at, and then you close the show with the right hand. And throughout the course of Max Holloway's career, the one shot that's really been hurting him is shots coming from the right hand, like whether it be right hooks or straight right hands. That's the punch that's really been the shot that keeps on landing on Max Holloway. And part of that is because of his guard. Like, he'll have his right hand raised and glued to his chin, but sometimes he does leave his left hand a little lower, and that leaves an opening for a right hand to catch him. And that's essentially what got him knocked out against Ilia Topuria. That's what got him dropped against Justin Gaethje and against Dustin Poirier as well. Charles Oliveira has a clean and powerful right hand, and I do think that if he's able to establish his jab and the combinations with the right hand, he will be able to eventually hurt Max Holloway. But moving on to another key trait I have for Charles, and that is one of the reasons why I believe Max Holloway was able to hurt Dustin Poirier was because whenever he was starting combinations, Dustin Poirier would sometimes just exit in a straight line, which encouraged Max Holloway to keep throwing because Dustin wasn't countering and he was just exiting, and it was clear where he was going to be at. So Max Holloway had no reason to stop throwing. And our natural reactions to seeing something coming at us is to simply back up in a straight line very often. So it's a very unnatural thing to not do that. But I do think it's going to be important for Oliveira to take angles as he's backing out. Maybe take 2 steps back and then cut an angle to your right or left, so that way you can avoid the shot and look to circle your way back into the center of the octagon. And also moving backwards is also not something too usual. So sometimes a lot of fighters aren't the quickest, but Oliveira does need to move quickly out the way because Max Holloway is a fast fighter. So you need to anticipate the danger and get out of there, because sometimes Oliveira, he'll be exiting and trying to cut angles, but he'll still get caught on the exit. And he has also been punched clean when he was backing up in straight lines by Michael Chandler and getting basically rocked. And against Max Holloway, this is something you can't do because this guy is a lot sharper than Michael Chandler. Maybe he's not quite as powerful, but whereas Michael Chandler might only hit you with 1 or 2 shots, Max Holloway has the ability to hit you with 4, 5, or 6 shots. So you need to be very careful because that is a massive threat. But since Charles Oliveira has shown to still get hit as he's taking 2 steps back and trying to cut an angle, another way you can defend yourself is maybe avoid the first shot. Maybe you can try to shoulder roll or simply block the shot or use head movement to get out the way of the first shot, and then you go into your clinch because again, you have the grappling advantage. You have the ability to finish the fight on the ground. So get into a clinch, avoid the first shot, and then get a hold of Max to stop that momentum and to stop those attacks. We talked about disrupting his rhythm. So maybe if he's attacking you, you can, again, go back to that strategy. But don't back up in straight lines against Max Holloway. He will clip you and he has the ability to hurt you. But moving on to another key trait I have for Charles Oliveira, and that is one of Max Holloway's main forms of defense is his footwork, and we've already talked about attacking the legs earlier, but another way you can take his movement away is by going forward and cutting the octagon off. and really putting that pressure on Max Holloway so that you can have an easier time landing your strikes. And Dustin Poirier, when he was moving forward, he was having success with Max Holloway. Same with Justin Gaethje. When they were able to get him closer to that fence, that's when they were having a little bit more success. Obviously, it was still very tricky to hit Max Holloway because he's very elusive and he has many ways of getting off the fence. But Charles Oliveira has to manage the distance properly. A lot of the times he comes forward and he doesn't quite manage the distance as well. And he very often walks into punches. He gets hit quite a lot, even though he's got a high guard, even though he's the one pressuring his opponent. He's not doing anything to make sure that it's safe to continue his pressure. One of the ways he can avoid this with Max Holloway is by trying to fight the hands. I know that this is an orthodox versus orthodox matchup, and typically fighting the hands is a lot more effective when it's a southpaw versus an orthodox because both of their elite hands are closer to each other. There's not the backhands that are in the way. The lead hands are what's forward in a southpaw versus orthodox matchup, but it is still possible when you're fighting an orthodox fighter as an orthodox fighter. Take a look at this clip from Daniel Cormier. He's able to kind of feel the distance from John Jones as he's hand fighting, and that kind of tells him, okay, this is a distance where I can land, but it's also a distance where I'm potentially in danger of getting hit. So Oliveira does have to be careful and be mindful of his distance because Max Holloway will absolutely hit him if he doesn't manage the distance properly and if he's just walking forward. But moving on to the last key to victory and another way Oliveira can properly pressure Max Holloway without getting hit, and that is Max Holloway is one of the sharpest and best strikers in the UFC. So if you try to attack him and get into his range without really setting it up, he's absolutely going to clip you with something that you probably aren't expecting because you're offensively minded, but he's going to see that you're not setting up your attack, so he's going to be able to beat you to the punch. And we talked about leg kicks earlier, and I mentioned that Oliveira has to make sure he's setting up his leg kicks, and this is what I was referring to. He's going to need to mask his attack so that he doesn't get countered, because Max Holloway has shown his timing by beautifully intercepting leg kicks. Maybe he will take the kick and then he'll fire off with a quick combination that ends up stunning his opponent because his opponent is just thinking about the leg kick and not really about getting hit, and that just catches the opponent off guard. And we've seen Charles Oliveira get hit quite a bit off of his leg kicks because he wasn't really doing anything to mask him. So his opponent, obviously everyone's super high level in the UFC, they're able to see that and punish you for trying to attack them without really setting it up. But the thing is, Charles Oliveira actually does have some really great feints to his arsenal, and I think that against Max Holloway, he's going to be needing to be on his A game and really showing those sharp feints to not only draw out attacks from Max Holloway, but make sure that he doesn't get hit with anything that can end the fight. But that does it for my take on how Charles Oliveira can beat Max Holloway. Obviously, he's going to need to do a lot more. Max Holloway is one of the best fighters, and he might be one of the best, even the second best lightweight on the planet. So Charles Oliveira is really going to need to be on his A game. But if you're interested in seeing my predictions for this fight and the fights on the main card of UFC 326, make sure you stay tuned. It's dropping later this week. But with that being said, make sure you like and subscribe. Thank you guys for watching. God bless, and I will see you in the next one.
Peace in our time.